when it comes to the faith, there are many different myths that are too common and yet are false and deceiving and misleading. And today we wanted to dispel them, expose all of these false beliefs, and help you get back on the right path of faith. You know, in the letter of Paul to his apostle Timothy, he told him to have nothing to do with those myths and old wives' tales, but to train himself in godliness, that is, the Word of God, and holiness and righteousness. So, we are going to share with you some points, and we will expand each one and help you understand, hopefully, why those are wrong. So the first one we want to talk about is heaven. Oh, that's a big one in the Christian religion, is it not? He died and went to heaven. He's watching down from heaven. He's waiting in heaven. Well, here's the reality check for you. Nobody yet is in heaven except the Lord. You don't die and go to heaven. That is not how it works. That is not rooted in scripture, and it is not rooted in truth. It is a fable and old wives' tale rooted in paganism. All of that, playing harp on a cloud, pictures of humans with wings, that's not angels, that's not heaven. Angels, for the most part, do not have wings. Read your scripture.
Yes, and there's only a few that are described with wings, and that would be in the Teruvim and Seraphim, Cherubim, particularly class of angels, and they're definitely not the wings that you see in most of your Hollywood and fairy tale books. And there's why so many people have a problem believing in heaven and in God. And by the way, all dogs don't go to heaven. You know, so many people of faith, touched by an angel movies and TV series, so many people who don't know God. I can understand why they have such a hard time when you take God and make him a cartoon, take faith and make it's cartoonish. In fact, you put heaven in the same category as you put all of the fairy tale nursery school rhymes that you teach your children. And it's fine for children, and that's why when you get older, it's the children that keep reading these little fairy tale cartoonish Noah's in the Ark kind of just, so isn't it cute? You don't live the promise of God. It's cute. You're telling them about Noah's Ark. That's a pretty traumatic story. Everybody dies. It's a horror story. But you turn it into a cutesy little thing with cute little animals and animals that act like humans, and they're just all cute with big eyelashes. And you turn the stories of God into cartoons. And it's very hard because, by the way, because it wasn't the unbelievers that did that. It's those who believe in God. And you have a little Muppet show. We're going to have a little Muppet show with Jesus, and the Veggie Tales and the vegetables are going to preach. It's really quite sad to degrade God's holiness and sanctity and sacredness of God and diminish it to make it cute and fun, non-offensive, taking off the sharp edges of it. And most of what we've done is we've turned it, those who believe have turned it into a fairy tale. You yourself have taken it. And it wasn't the enemy that did that. You did that. You didn't value it. And you torture children in a way so that they could see this is something for nursery schools and childhood. But when you get old, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, acted like a child, I played like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. No, not really. Except for the fact that when you became a man, you believed that God was the God of your toddler nursery school childhood, that he was simply a Nickelodeon episode. He was a Disney character, no different than Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and all the other ones in between. He was even a Marvel hero. But I can't say that because, after all, you see how seriously they take Comic-Con and the Marvel heroes and the furries. I mean, this is pretty serious. Halloween used to be something for kids. It's not anymore. It's mostly adults who celebrate Halloween today. And I mean, it's crazy what they do. You have taken the Lord and you diminished him. Now, where does this start? Because we could go back to Egypt and probably before then, but since we all usually refer to Egypt, it's the closest thing in our historical memory of comparative empires and what we most resemble. And when the pharaohs would die, they would put them in a little sarcophagus with coins on their eyes. They would bury them with their pets and all the things they like and the foods. They would try to put it in a place that was void of air and moisture. Keep it preserved because they're going into what? The underworld. And we have to give them things so they can survive their passage to the underworld. You know, eternity and antiquity in his history was the underworld. Samuel was called up, not called down. He wasn't in heaven coming down. He was called up from below. He was in a place, what some call paradise, a holding place. Others give it something they called Sheol or purgatory. It had different compartments. Yeshua, the Testaments declare, where was he for 3 days before he went up? He went down and preached to the souls, those people of faith, those people of righteousness, those who had had faith that was counted to them at the time for righteousness. The Lord will judge you where you're at. There is a righteousness even before you hear the gospel, it's where you're at. And those that lived righteously, he ministered to them. Now, let the captives of the captivity free. He told the thief on the cross, this day you shall be with me in paradise. So there are situations in history that we see where a lot of these beliefs were born. Hades, the underworld. The throne room of God is so holy with the angelic beings and the Elohim that there is a time when we will be elevated, resurrected by him. He laid down his life and picked it up. We don't get to lay down our life and pick it up. So we have to understand we're not going to be walking around heaven all day, seeing grandma and mama and eating that southern fried green tomatoes and cornbread. It doesn't quite work that way. I know many of you would like heaven to be like that. You know, you want all the things of earth in heaven, especially your pet dog or cat. But don't diminish heaven. Don't anthropomorphize. Don't attribute human characteristics to an angelic divine being. Our human characteristics are really as a result of the curse. We were divine before we fell. Now we want to go back to be divine and take the baggage of our curse into the divinity. It doesn't work that way. And it's understandable why we think that, because that's all we know. I'm not faulting most of you or myself. Listen, it's all we know. We were never, we have no divinity. We have humanity and sanity. But the Lord remembers what we were because he's the one that created us. We don't know what we were. We have no idea how we were. But he does. And he's restoring, renovating. He's the one resurrecting and bringing it back to its intended purpose and more. So these myths were born in history. And you can chase every myth that was born in history, but the going to heaven, it gives us great solace. I know it's just human. Get it? We all are human. We're only human. But when you know that you're only human, it's like knowing you have a broken foot and acting like you don't. You're just going to re-injure yourself and hinder your therapy and recovery. You got to at some point go, no, I'm an alcoholic. I can't watch the Super Bowl. It's going to be a bunch of drunken commercials. When you admit who you are, you change your actions. No, I'm not going to go to a restaurant and order liquor and wine and beer when I'm eating. No, I'm not going to go to that wedding because I know there's going to be an open bar. You have to physically do something to resist the myths, else you're just going to accommodate it. Father says, when you walk in that place, you go to a place where they don't sell wine and beer. Turn off the television when you know that there's a bunch of wine and beer commercials, particularly on holidays. Don't go to the wedding. Don't go to the office party. Don't go to that person's house. You have to physically do something. The Lord helps those who help themselves. Well, that is partly true, meaning you got to do something. The Lord will take up the majority. It's like a bank loan. Well, you come in with a, $5,000, $10,000 or $20,000. We'll give you the other $200,000. What are you putting on the table in your faith to get rid of the myths and to shed them? Because you have to physically do something to shed it, whether it's taking down a picture, whether it's not going to a certain family event because you know what they do. What are you doing? You have to be active in your healing. Doctors tell you this all the time. Listen, we can do this, but you got to help me out here. I'm not a miracle worker. But together we can work a miracle. And doctors even tell you that even when you do everything that they tell you, still it's up to the body. That's God's business. So this is what I can do. The rest is up to, it's up to the Lord now. The doctors say, well, we've done all we can, ma'am. Well, it's up to God. Well, it was always up to God. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do all you can. Sometimes you shouldn't, by the way. But it doesn't mean that every time you should. Sure, do what you know. Do what you know. But God gets the glory because it's always up to the body. You can't force the body to do something. There's too many variables and unknowns and uncertainties. And that's why faith is so important, no matter where you go. The psychosomatic effect of positive faith to produce the result that God had ensued us with, endowed us with, programmed us with in our software. So we will have a day where we will be resurrected. The scripture said, will we be known as we are known? No marriage in heaven. I hate to tell my Mormon friends. Will we be known as we are known? Know how many 32 wives to my Islamic buddies, or however many wives. That number may have gone up to get more recruits. Who knows? Will we be known as we are known? You're going to have a new name. You're going to have a new song. You're going to be transformed, not transgendered. So we have to dispel that myth of heaven. Be encouraged by it. Don't be so earthbound that you're going to lose your heavenly ticket. And that's really the resurrection, the new earth. Now remember, there is a new earth. There is a new earth. And during the millennial kingdom, not so much until the end of the 1,000-year reign of the king.
So that's another point. See, nobody, like we said, dies and goes to heaven. There's a long way until that day of what we call heaven is the kingdom of heaven, which is really the kingdom of heaven on earth, right? You don't go up to heaven, you stay right here on earth, and the king brings down the new Jerusalem to the new earth, right? But before that day, there is what we call the millennial age, 1,000 years of Mashiach reigning on earth and teaching the nations his Torah, his instructions to finish the work of sanctification of our souls. Remember, just because you die, you're not made perfect. All of a sudden, you're just so pure and innocent-hearted. No, you die, you go to sleep, and then you wake up and you're still yourself. So, there's work to be done. And the millennial age, as some might call it the golden age, but if you actually read the Word of God, particularly Ezekiel 39, that's pretty horrifying. I mean, it starts with 7 months of burials of the 200 million army, 7 months of burying body, and then after those 7 months, appointing people for the job of going through the land and finding the remains. That's...
And don't forget the reminder of when the nations come to Jerusalem for that 1,000-year period. There is a certain memorial that is pretty horrific that you're going to have to see.
Yeah, Isaiah 66, the bodies that will burn and be abhorrent to all humanity. And as you leave Jerusalem, that's what you're gonna look at, to remind you the consequence of sin. Not so Disney.
No, there's no Disney, and there's no, as Trump would say, the golden age. Well, the golden age is a long way away, and it's not about the gold standard in the United States. It's not about the economic prowess of our financial techno gurus. There is no golden age yet. That's the Lord's job. Do not subjugate God's position. No golden age, my friends, those who are believers. I don't know and don't care what you secular politicians and conservatives and liberals and capitalists and fascists and Marxists and whatever you want to call yourselves. Don't rob that word. That word belongs to Papa. Adonai, Elohim, Hashem has declared what the golden age is. And it's not the gold that you get on your Bitcoin and your blockchain exchanges. It's not on the metals stock market. It's the King of Kings, the New Jerusalem.
And like we said, that happens at the end of the 1,000 years of reigning right here on this very earth from Jerusalem on this very land in Israel. Just like it was before, there will be a physical temple, and the nations, same nations as they are now, will come to Jerusalem to worship Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of Israel. It's going to be very practical and very, very real.
And it will be an eternal kingdom. So when men tell you about a golden age, well, Nixon took America off the gold standard. But that was Nixon. I was alive when Nixon was here. A golden age must be a pretty short period, isn't it? When it's only the length of a presidential term. I don't think you get to say a golden age when you're not going to live much longer than 4 years, 10 years, 40 years, 5 years, 80 years. That's not a term you ascribe to the menial expectancy of a political administration or a human being whose lifespan, if it's any good, will be up to 80 if he's still sane and not senile. So let's ascribe the words to God that belong only to him, not to us.
Now another point and another myth, very similar, goes hand in hand with what we talked about, is the fact that there is no such thing as instant sanctification. Like we said, 1,000 years of you living here on this earth, purifying yourself and learning, studying Torah. Many Christians say, all you have to do is confess with your mouth and believe with your heart that Jesus is Lord and God raised him from the dead and you will be saved. Well, you don't even know what that means. Let me explain something. If you believe in your heart, that means you actually have the fear of God and you take his word serious. And if you take his word serious, then you know that he said, keep my commandments. And he said that I will write my Torah on your heart, Jeremiah 31, talking about the new covenant. So there is a very specific period of time that has not yet come, that will be 1,000 years while he is ruling the earth. There will be peace for the purpose of let's all now make the entire globe a yeshiva, which is a seminary to study Torah, and he is going to let the entire human race learn how to properly live by his measure of righteousness and reshape our minds by continual repetition, day in, day out, of the renewal of our minds by his spirit, not by power, not by might. He will do the work, but we have to be willing and submit under him to actually do the work inside of us. In other words, like Stephen said with the loan, we do the little, he does the lot, but we still have to do the little. And that will take time.
And he said, I will cause you to obey my Torah. I will cause you to walk right. We all can admit, no matter how holy we think we are, we all know the struggle. It's a struggle. Not impossible, not hard necessarily, but a struggle. Because remember, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. In other words, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, I will enable you. When you are weak, don't worry about it. Then you are strong. For in your weakness, my strength is perfected. So God, Adonai, gives us strength now in this wobble of a walk that we have. He gives us strength now in our weakness to get back up. Fall down, get back up. Fall down, get back up. He gives us strength now. Now, that's not the perfect picture of what he wants from us. It is simply the grace that's afforded to us as a result of our current condition that we are in. And so, when we are in that period, Father will cause the Torah. He will cause us to obey. We can only do so much. A perfect God uses imperfect people to do his perfect will. We could only do so much. And you can see it. Even the heroes in the faith. We all notice the weaknesses of those that are celebrated as the heroes of the faith. In Hebrews chapter 11 and 12, we know we can talk about the greatness of Abraham, or we can talk about something. Well, the Lord called him great, but didn't he do this? Wow, the Lord called Gideon great, but didn't he do this? God called Isaiah great, but didn't he say this? Oh, David? Oh, man after God's own heart. Well, didn't this happen? These were good men, obviously. There were men much worse, but that's not the measure. But the point was, they were good men. Even Asa, right? King Asa. We can see still in these great men, Solomon, the wisest man. We can still see the humanity, even Job in his conversations with Adonai, his friends. We see the greatness. You still see they're not flawless men, they're holy men. And you know that their heart is intended and straight towards God. But we still wobble. Which is why holiness is so preached for us, because in all of our quest and pursuit to hit that arrow, not miss that mark, hit that bullseye with that arrow of our faith walk, we come short in some ways, don't we? But don't use coming short as an excuse. You can't use that as an excuse to justify getting drunk every week. Well, I'm coming short. No, 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 no. That's not what I'm talking about. David wasn't going around having affairs every week.
So that comes back to number 15, where it talks about a man who sins by mistake and a man who sins by purpose. A man who rejects the word of Adonai and sins on intention, knowing the law and still doing what is wrong, is blaspheming. He's shown contempt for the word of Adonai. So, when you talk about grace, remember, we often says this. Grace is for when you cannot, not for when you will not. It's not for you to keep on sinning and keep asking God for forgiveness when you sin intentionally. We get it. You're human. You have a weakness of the flesh. You have lust. You have issues. You see a girl, and before you know it, you slept with her, and then you're regretful. You're full of remorse. What did I do? What did I do? Well, that's one thing. But knowing it and then still choosing, I'm just gonna go and sleep with this girl, whatever. That's different. It's not because you were weak. It's because you were just defiant and rebellious. I'm gonna show you.
And women go through this with looking for men. They feel old and manless, old maids. And I tell you, the real root of it is you see anything as the reason for your spiritual joy and satiation in God, apart from God. There's nothing wrong with looking for a husband. There's nothing wrong with looking for a wife. There's nothing wrong with uh, prosperity. And that's another one we have to, the myth of prosperity and how that's defined. But there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is you go, that's your foundation. In other words, well, I just want to be married. And if I get a good husband, and then I'll be a good servant of the Lord. So then man is God to you. So when things are going right with your job, now you're serving the Lord. No, then your job is God. In other words, God is just waiting for your real God to treat you right. And when you're happy with your real God, that affects you with God, the Lord, the King of Kings, Adonai. Isn't it the opposite way around? Who's greater, the woman or God? Who's greater, the job or God? Who's greater, the man or God? So you tend to look at your life, you rob God of your faithfulness and you rob God of the service and glory that's due him if you don't have something lesser. And everything other than him is lesser, no matter what it is. It's lesser. It's lesser. So wouldn't you want to have the greater thing? The resource of the greater thing fuels the life of the lesser thing, not the other way around. It's not, well, if I just get my family together, then I can go and be a great servant of the Lord. Well, no, 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 no. It trickles down from your highest goal of your relationship, mine, ours, our relationship with Papa is right. You'll have a right relationship with your wife. That's why I say you cannot say you love God and hate your brother. That it's not, he's not saying first love your brother, then love God. He's saying if you loved God, you wouldn't hate your brother.
And here's another thing. Loving your brother is not loving God. Oh, that's a big one. Loving your neighbor does not mean loving God. You know how many people say that in Israel, Jewish people? They say, well, how can you love God? Well, loving God is loving your neighbor because, well, you're right here with me. No, 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 no. That's a component of it, but it's not the whole of it because the Lord is spirit. You have to love him in spirit in your heart, and out of that love for him, you physically love the people around you that belong to him. But the second doesn't include the first.
Well, you said the Jewish people, but it's everywhere in America, secularism and humanism, right? Just be kind. Let's be kind to the earth and be kind to the pets and be kind to my, I'm not that bad. I'm nice to my neighbors. I'm nice to my friend. God is looking, but you're not nice to me. You don't tithe. You don't give offerings. You don't witness of me. You don't declare my name. My name is in God, by the way. That's another myth. Now, you hear us use it a lot because it is a culture of understanding, but we preached many times, talked in conversations about the term and the name God. But what God? Which God? Polytheism. There are many gods. Hindus have millions or a million. God knows all of the ancient names. Some of the names is because they didn't know what the name was. That's okay. When you don't know, but you name it on your own. You come up with all different kinds of names, false names, wrong names. They are iterations of Zeus and Ra and Horus from Egypt and Ishtar and Asherah and the harvest gods, the agri, all kinds of different things, right? We don't know what to call it. So what do I call you? Then we get nicknames. Then when we get a name, well, no, this is his actual. This is how he wants to be known. The liberal progressive, my identity. This is how I want to be identified. They say that religiously in America. How I choose how I want to be identified. You called me by the wrong identity. What do you think God's going to do when you called him by the wrong one? With intention, by the way, not someone who innocently doesn't know. So that's not what we're talking about. When you don't know what somebody's name is, you've been there, you called them the wrong name. I've done it many times, right? And God knows the way people dress today. I'm saying yes, ma'am, and it's a woman. Or I'm saying yes, sir, and it's a, well, it could get a little confusing, can it? And that's why the Lord said, when Moses said, well, who shall I say is sending me? How do you identify? I am that I am. Yet I am that I am. I'll tell you this for now, just say this, and I'll give you more of who I am later. So the idea is understanding that. So we all are seeking relationships and identity, but it's your relationships with me or your family or whoever, it should be out an outgrowth of your prayer life with Papa. Pray privately in your closet, and then you can see the results of it in the public square, not the opposite way around. You don't pray out in the public square looking for the results in the closet. When you're doing at home, on your knees and pray, and you just can't say prayer. It's not like a 10-second thing. It's not just something where you're doing all the talking. It's really, you got to wait and listen, learn how to hear the voice of God by being quiet. And you got to quiet your mind and your thoughts to hear Papa. Because we've got a train station in our head and so many different things that requires us to cast down thoughts and imaginations and biases and craziness on your drug use and your alcoholic and your trauma and your drama. How are you going to hear Papa? It's going to be hard. I said in my sermon the other day, I've been through a lot in my life, and many of you have as well. I've been, mocked, maligned, lied on, stepped on, talked about, lied about, rejected, ejected, dejected. But when I reflected on all of that, God gave me Adonai Hashem Elohim, my Redeemer, Yeshua HaMashiach, the strength through it all. So you can reflect on all of it. When your car turned over, when your plane nearly crashed, when the doctor said you're going to die, when this happened, that happened, this happened, you didn't think you were going to make it, jobless, homeless, all of those things, right? Friendless, lonely. Where was Papa? Right there. Don't you think he deserves your faithfulness, or you're just waiting for him to do something else? So quick to move on from what God has done that you have no faithfulness to the Holy One. What next? Well, I need this deal done. He did it. No, you should be faithful for the next 6 months or to a 12-year, next year, 12 months, something. No. Oh, I got another. You go from crisis to crisis, and then you take that crisis to crisis, forgetting what Papa has done, not acting in faith because you're living in crisis mode. Don't let the crisis dictate your faith life. It is your faith life that dictates the crisis. The faith life, no matter what, good times, bad times. They told you that when you got married, but none of you apply that to your faith. You're willing to apply it to a woman who lives, 10, 12, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and she's dead? She's going to lose her beauty in about 20 years of marriage, if not sooner. She's definitely going to gain weight. Some things going to change about her. But Father, who never changes, who remains the same, always is, always will be, always was, the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, the end. It is to him that you have this myth of faithlessness. He'll get you through it, you, me, and everyone in between. But we have to be faithful to who he is. When we're on God's side, he's on ours. You're so faithless. Why?
Remember what he said in Malachi. Return to me, and I will return to you. The Lord is waiting. The Lord is not far away. It's not the Lord that has forsaken his people. It's the people that forsaken the Lord. Now, speaking of which, you did mention not to do a 10-second prayer. Well, I want to add also, do not add a 3-hour prayer. Because as Yeshua said, the Lord will not hear you because of your many words and ritualistic ceremonies. Going to synagogue for 3 hours on Shabbat morning, praying, nodding back and forth at the kotel. No. The Lord is not listening to all of that. The Lord wants a genuine and sincere heart. Could be a 10-second prayer if it's sincere. Oh Lord, save me. Oh Lord, help me. If you're going through something right now. I had a stomach ache the other day. Those things, you're just like, oh Lord, help me. And he did. The other day also I made a message. I had a mosquito in my room. I hate those things. And I prayed for the Lord to deliver him into my hand. And before I knew it, he was dead in my hand. Miracle. I didn't touch anything and there he was. See, 5-second prayer, but sincere, genuine, and, giving God the glory. So it doesn't need to be short and it doesn't need to be long. It just needs to be wholehearted and sincere in spirit and truth.
Amen. Isn't it something? The quality, not the quantity. The quality of a gift. Someone can give you a lot of money with a nasty attitude. Someone can give you the widow's mite with love and everything they've got. It's never about the amount. It's about the heart. It's circumcision of the heart, not the barikbala. It's about the heart.
And speaking of prayers, one more thing we want to add is the fact that, listen to this, pay attention, this is a big one. Nobody gets saved because you prayed for their salvation. That's not how it works. You do not get to pray people into the kingdom of heaven.
That's right. And it's interesting. Now, don't confuse what we're saying. Intercessory prayer for people, yes. And particularly those intercessory prayers. We talked about the prayers that we do when people are sick or looking for a miracle and the physical matter of this world, what that does when you are praying for people, to pray for the sick. But there is no praying for the salvation. That is an act. The salvation is an act of God, not an act of prayer. It's an act of God. Now, it's one thing when you're praying to be saved out of a dungeon, out of a prison, praying to be saved out of slavery or a hostage situation, praying to God to deliver you from an enemy. When it comes to the soul, praying to be saved is an act of God, which requires you in that act to do two things. One is to acknowledge who can save your soul, and then to do what that person, what that being, what he, Yadhe gives you to do in order to accept the salvation that comes directly. You can wish somebody out of the drowning water, praying for them to be saved. It's not going to make any difference if that person does not reach for the life raft, for the life vest, for the lifesaver, for the helicopter Coast Guard waterman who rescues him by hoisting down on a line from a suspended helicopter that's holding its space, trying to pull you up, and you not taking hold of his hand, and then you not holding on. Hold on to me. Lifeguards in California, their biggest fear, one of them, is not the water, it's you. When they swim out to save you and you panic, rescuing a panicking swimmer drowning is the scariest moment. They may drown you. They are so panicked, they may drown you. And they have to sometimes let you drown to keep themselves alive from drowning because you are so panicked. Do what you're told to do. Hold on. Let go. And let me. They tell, let go. Well, you gotta let go. You gotta grab it. You gotta let go. Let go. I said, let go. I'll pull you out. And you've got to trust that. You've got to trust that. You got to trust in the Lord's salvation. But that requires you, whosoever will, not whosoever is prayed for, whosoever will, let him come. It's an act of salvation. Firemen go through it. Police go through it. Nobody can force you out of a hole. They can put a ladder down there. They can hoist a rope to you. You got to grab on. You got to grab on to that rope. You got to do something. And for your soul, it requires you to do something. The good news about that, you don't have to be physically well to be saved. You can be sick. You can be paralyzed. A coma, well, that's another story. But as long as you've got your right mind, you're in the right mind to say yes or blink your eyes. Can you hear me, Steve? Blink your eyes if you can hear me. Blink once. Blink twice for yes. Blink once for no. Do you want the Lord? Blink twice. He blinks twice.
Well, and you don't even have to blink. Again, it's in your spirit. You just have to invite him in and trust him.
It doesn't require you to even mutter a word. If you're hearing, if your mind is understanding what's being said, and you can't talk, you can be saved because you can say yes with your spirit. If you can't say yes with your mouth, and we all know too often the people that say yes with their mouth but live differently in their spirit. People that say I love you but live like they hate you. People that say you're my friend but they don't show up like a friend. People that say you're like family, they leave you out of the holidays and the special occasions. You're not family. You're not a friend. You see what I mean? Real faith is genuine. Rather you go through what's a prescribed ritual or ceremony. Well, he didn't come. No, 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 no. You can tell because when you've been changed, you've been changed. But that is a decision that you have to make. I can't make that for you. God can't make that for you. You have to make that. Preachers can't, priests can't, imams can't, rabbis can't. Only you can make that decision. It is up to you. And it's in your will, it's your heart.
And like we said, that decision is not the destination, it's just the beginning of the journey. It's not instant salvation, it's now you're on the path. So you're covered, you're on the path. Now you have to walk the path. Yeshua said, I am the way, meaning he's the path that you have to walk. They asked him, where should we go? He said, you know the way. He said, I am the way. Live as I lived, he said to his disciples. Now, how did he live? Obedience to God, up to the point of laying down his life. Even when he was tempted, right? He said, Father, if possible, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, your will be done, not mine, right? He was willing to lay down his life. That is the way. That is how you ought to live your life until you get there.
Well, it says that he learned obedience by the thing which he experienced, the Lord. So, instant salvation, well, you didn't get an instant degree. And if you did, you paid for it, right? You had to go through all of your semesters. You didn't get an instant rank in the military. You didn't get an instant corner office. Well, unless you slept to get there or you paid for it or bribed it, right? All things being equal by natural processes and progress. You achieved it over time. Jeff Bezos didn't become rich instantly. He was losing money for a long time before he was ever gaining. That gets back to the myth of prosperity. That God owes you something. Well, how many people would have looked at Jeff Bezos and all of these other billionaires that weren't born with a silver spoon? How how did they get there? I guess they weren't prosperous. Somebody might be meeting you in the moment where you are kind of a rough, tough ruffian hooligan who's just trying to get every penny he can, like Colonel Sanders when he was starting out with his gas stations and his bars and his restaurants. It wasn't until his elderly age that he entered into a financial prosperity. And he had gone through a lot before that KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken organization. And it was in his elderly age where he gave up cursing, swearing, drinking, smoking, womanizing, and became a follower of the Lord. That when the corporation swooped in and finally took over, he let them have it and took the millions that they gave him and evangelized the world by supporting. He supported people. He wasn't trying to be an evangelist. He took the money and supported people that he believed were doing God's work. That was Colonel Sanders. He put his money where his mouth was, and he put the chicken in your mouth. But he went around and he did. I'm going to give my millions. I'm going to support people who are preaching. Some people try to take advantage of him. That's just the way the world works, right? When they see a rich man or man with money, all of a sudden get saved. Oh, they want to get close to him, right? But he's had some good men that he believed in, that he trusted, and he gave his money to anything that they needed for the cause of God. A beautiful, beautiful man with a beautiful testimony. It's funny how when you have a real heart, a sincere heart, you can see it when people talk. You can see it the way they live it. It's not an argument. It's not a debate. There's a humility, prosperity gospel. It's humility. It's sacrifice, self-sacrifice. It's considering those that are lesser. And it's realizing that everything that you are and have belongs to the Lord. He never boasted, this is what I made, this is what I did, I built this empire. He didn't see that. His life, his being, what a beautiful way to go out. What a great testimony. It's a wonderful thing. See, the Spirit says, I wish above all, brethren, that you prosper, but as your soul prospers. It's the opposite way around for most of you. You don't even think of spiritual prosperity until you get your real estate deal or your stock deal or your business deal or your new salary. Then you start talking about what you're going to do for God. Why aren't you doing that for God now? You make God wait, but you hate it when he makes you wait, you hypocrites. Why don't you just stop and just stop fighting it? You'll be so much happier when you stop fighting what God is saying. How should I be born again? Can I go back into my mother's womb and be born again? Nicodemus asked. Yeshua said, why don't you know this already? It's in the Torah. It's not that complicated. We complicate things that are not complicated. If we would just listen, of course, your wives tell you that all the time. If you would just listen, trust and obey, for there's no other way. To get rid of these myths and rituals, ceremonies that your parents or grandparents or company or church or society or your culture has induced you with and indoctrinated you with, just trust and obey the Lord. Being pure, the pure in heart shall see God. It's impossible not to see God. When your heart's not right, you're going to be unstable, like a ship tossing by the waves of the sea. You're going to be unstable because it's a heart condition you have. You just are full of pride and ego and self. Let that go and you'll be the happiest you've ever been because you'll be blessed. And that's the word happy, blessed.